Hey, good to see you. Good to see you. Normally I signal when I'm supposed to finish the kirtans. If I want to figure out what I'm going to talk about, they give me a minute. But then every once in a while, they just stop, and I'm left unprepared. So I'm just going to mutter my way through this, see where we go. Well, I guess we'll start with this. I generally don't prepare for lectures because I lecture 5 or 6 days a week, minimum. And, it just doesn't... I generally just tend to share with you guys what I'm thinking about on a given day at a given time. So as I was parking, some jerk stole my spot. I have a spot in the red I always park in. It's my spot. I've been parking there since before it was red. I was parking there when it was still white, and then they hadn't painted it red yet. And I never stopped. I've gotten a few tickets there over the years, but it's been worth that. I just consider it like I'm paying for a parking space, But like, a very, very small amount, like 50 cents every time I park. I got nabbed for 2 tickets in 6 or 7 years. But anyway, somebody was parked in my spot, so I just had to bump into them and push them back a little bit with my car. Turn that single spot into a double spot. I didn't actually do that, but I did do the double spot thing. I didn't push them back with my car. I gave him a little love tap, but that's about it. Anyway, as I was pulling up, I was thinking about how when things don't go your way, like you don't get a parking spot you want, and then it turned into this. So, it's good for me to share with you guys what I'm thinking about. It's important to express the ideas you have in your head that you think make sense, because oftentimes when you say them out loud, they're nonsensical. They're foolish. And even if you're a fool that can't string 2 sentences together and has all sorts of poor connections between ideas and unreasonable correlations between your ideas, and you sound like a conspiracist when you open your mouth, as long as you don't open your mouth and you just do the self-talk thing, you'll think you're smart because you have all of your own cognitive biases. And so when you're talking to yourself, you're preaching to the choir and none of it gets revealed. If you're a little smarter and you speak your ideas out to an audience, you're able to step apart from yourself and empathetically listen through your audience's ears. And then all of the poor connections and conspiracy theory level correlations that you're finding, they get revealed. Did that make sense? I'm just going to say it again. We all have cognitive biases. And when we're talking to ourselves in our head, those biases don't seem like biases because it's your skewed way of viewing the world. And so you're preaching to the choir, and your fallacious thinking patterns don't get revealed. In fact, you think you sound really smart, kind of like a drunk person who tries to rap and thinks that they're really good until they listen to a recording of themselves the next day. Did you guys follow that? How did I come up with that one? Because when I was 16, I lived in Venice, and I was hanging out with my friends at the beach, and we got drunk, and I thought I was rapping really well. And then the next day, my friends had recorded me, and I listened to the recording of myself rapping, and I realized I sound like a bumbling idiot. That's why I have that strange and weird example pinballing around in my head to break out because I have an actual experience of it. The mini experience of it is when you sing, you think you sound one way. When you listen to a recording of yourself sing, you sound different. You might not even recognize your own voice. So, if you're not a complete narcissist and you don't suffer from a ridiculous amount of intellectual myopia, when you talk to other people, you start to think about how a normal person would perceive what you say. And you get out of your cognitive biases by speaking to an audience. I was talking to somebody recently from New Zealand who was inviting me to participate in a YouTube channel they have where they have different people debate. And he was telling me he'd figured this out, and I was like, yeah, you didn't, are you kidding me? Of course you have to practice your arguments on people. You can't just stew them around in your head. And he thought, he just figured this out. It was like he uncovered something, and I was surprised that not everybody knew this. A couple days ago, I was surprised that not everybody knew this. I thought the point was so obvious, no one could possibly think otherwise. Again, my cognitive bias that people are intelligent. I can admit when I made a mistake, and there was that one time where I thought I was wrong, and then I realized I was right, and I'm humble enough to admit it. And so, if you're not a complete narcissist, when you speak out your thoughts out loud, you start to think about them from the other person's perspective because they're out in the ether. You see their facial expressions, you listen to yourself talking, and then your foolishness starts to reveal itself. Sometimes when somebody says something to me that makes no sense, I'll say to them, do you think you made sense right now? Do you think that point made sense? You guys must have had me say that to you in the past. I mean, not you, but you've heard me say that to you, right? I've definitely said that to you. I've definitely said it to you about a gazillion times, right? Mm-hmm. And then, sometimes people will be like, yeah, I think I'm making sense. And then I'll be forced to point out to them all the ways they don't make sense. But usually just that question is enough for them to say, no, I don't think I'm making sense. Let me start over again. And, you're forced to autocorrect. It's therapeutic. It's autocorrective because we have within ourselves innately the ability to think logically. Unless you have a schizoaffective disorder or something like that, most of us have the innate ability to think logically. And that's another thing. I'm from a beach town temple, and so inevitably beach towns are rough and tumble. It might not seem like that, like I'm from dangerous Laguna Beach or something like that, but there's a lot of rough characters. Beach towns attract them. It's like wharf rats. The human variety of wharf rats. They go to beach towns. When I lived in Santa Monica, we had them. I lived in Venice, we had them. Now I live in Laguna Beach. It's like the same crew of people. They're following me wherever I go. I'm starting to think it's some kind of conspiracy or something. But, oftentimes, I think someone was just telling me about this recently. They were talking about somebody crazy they were talking to. And then they had to call the cops on them. And they're like, yeah, they were really crazy. I'm like, were they crazy in front of the cops? And then they said, no, they weren't crazy in front of the cops. They chilled out once the cops arrived. And I said, yeah, they weren't crazy. Mike Tyson one time said, everybody's got a plan until you punch him in the face. Everybody would talk about how they were going to beat Tyson when they were boxing Tyson. Then he'd walk out there, walk through their punches, and hit him. And they were on Queer Street, and they just, their whole plan was out the window, and they were covering up like they'd never boxed a day in their life, and the end was nigh. So everybody talks all crazy until the cops show up. Like all those insurrectionists at the Capitol, the millions of insurrectionists, the invisible millions of insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol building. If you talk to any crowd assessment specialist, 5,000 plus, maybe 10,000, but there's definitely not millions. But if you listen to those guys, there's millions of us. You can't stop us. None of them had guns. All these crazy militia people who were online talking about how they were going to kill everybody on the planet, kill all, hang Mike Pence and this and that. None of them brought guns with them. How come? Because they're not crazy. Crazy people would have brought guns, thinking like, we're going to take over, let's bring our guns. Those guys, the riot never would have happened. The easy way to fix that riot would have been to shoot a few people. That would have been it. The one lady they shot, that was it. Like the whole hallway that was filled with a crazy mad mob. The moment she hit the deck, everybody boogied. And that hall was completely empty in about half a second. The Capitol Police were under orders not to draw their weapons. I'm bummed they got those orders. I'm bummed they followed those orders. Some guy lost his eye. I mean, man, somebody's gouging your eye out. Shoot him in the face, A couple people died. A guy got his head smashed in with a fire extinguisher. The person who did that definitely deserves to be shot. What happens is, if people will push the envelope until they know that if they keep pushing the envelope, something really bad's going to happen to them. That's what separates the men from the boys in terms of the crazy factor. Prabhupada used to tell a story about two lazy men. The king of a village said, I will feed all the lazy men in my kingdom. And so everybody showed up. Most people don't understand hunger. But if you serve free food in India, in the village, or even in the city for that matter, if you decide we're going to feed 50,000 people a day, and you cook for 50,000 people like khichdi, like a rice and bean stew, 50,000 people show up at your doorstep. Because people are working just to eat. We have no experience of this, but in India you can buy a small glass vial, like what I used to buy liquid LSD in, a small glass vial. That's the only, or liquid opium. Like the only things I can think of that I ever got in a small glass vial are these things. Hash oil is another one. I guess a few of them, but anyway. Come in a small glass vial. Like imagine a glass vial that held maybe like an ounce of liquid, something like that. You can buy that much oil. You can buy that much vegetable oil. And so people go and they'll buy just a small little glass vial full of vegetable oil, and like a potato and a small head of cauliflower. Cauliflowers we have here are like on steroids or something. They're like mutated things. If you look at India, like at an actual just regular sized cauliflower, it's like, it's like yay big. It's a little guy. You'll buy like a head of cauliflower and a couple of potatoes and a little vial of oil, and you cook your dinner. A little tiny bit of rice. You can buy super small quantities of that. Because people work all day, they get paid at the end of the day, and then they go buy dinner for their family with the money they earn that day, and they literally live hand to mouth. We have the whole food security thing because we're, half a socialist country. We have a mixed economy. People are like anti-socialists. They think AOC, Alexandria Octavia Cortez, right? No. What is it? Ocasio-Cortez. I tried to remember from yesterday, but I forgot. AOC, coolest person in Congress. Did you heard what she did? She went on Twitter to her 12 million gay, lesbian, transgendered, communist followers, and in 2 days raised $2 million for the white, homophobic, racist Texans. and then went down to Texas to give them millions of dollars of charity that she herself raised from New York. Did you guys hear about this? So cool. Ted Cruz, senator from Texas, rips on AOC like he's got some kind of thing for her or something like that. Then the cold front hit and he boogied down to Cancun and they caught him. They caught him. And so then there's like, Texas froze, Ted fled. And showed him like on the beach with a Corona drinking a beer. And he was just so like, he probably won't get reelected. I mean, it's really bad. He looks like such a jerk. It was so bad he had to run back to Texas. Like he had to bail on his vacation. But while he was doing that, then AOC raised $2 million for Texas that hates her. And it was like, it was just like the coolest politician ever. We shouldn't be talking about politics now. It's time to like get rid of the aisle and stop talking about the size of the aisle. These are Americans. They need our help. I'm on my way down to Texas right now to help feed these Americans. And that's like probably like the shrewdest political move I've seen in like all year. Of course, it's only February, but whatever. It's like a very shrewd political move any year. Did you guys hear about this? So, she's a card-carrying, proud to say it socialist. Somehow if you say the word socialist, are you a socialist? It's like saying, are you a member of the KKK? Like to a good old, actually, it's not like that. It's like saying to somebody, because the KKK doesn't create this amongst Americans from the Red Sea. So it's like saying to somebody, like, are you a socialist? Like saying, like, are you like a North Korean spy? That's like what's the equivalent of saying now, Depends on what time of history you were. You could be like, are you a South African Afrikaner? That would have been like in the 80s when apartheid was still kicking strong. And then before that would have been like, are you a socialist? Because that was from the USSR, the United Soviet Socialist Republic, and that was like behind the Iron Curtain. But the word socialist, since the late 40s and early 50s and the Red Scare, Google it if you want to, where we persecuted supposed communists. Being a communist or a socialist has been associated with being like evil personified. But socialism is where you get things like universal health care and food security and the safety net and welfare programs and affirmative action, free education. You know what I mean? That's all socialist stuff. And so most economies of the world, even when we say we hate socialists, they're actually mixed economies, and socialism plays a big part in any sort of civilized country where you think that people shouldn't be dying in the streets because they can't afford health care. Anyway, so she's an avowed socialist, which gets her a lot of heat, although obviously she has a little bit of a political education because she's like, what's wrong with you? Yes, I'm a socialist. What's the problem with that? So is Australia. So is New Zealand. So is all the Scandinavian countries. So like almost all of Western Europe would fit under that same umbrella. Germany, so many countries would fit under that umbrella. Anyway, we don't know like what actual food insecurity looks like. You got to go travel to a third world country and hang out with the people, and then you find out what it looks like. But a lot of people live hand to mouth, literally. Like you work all day and make enough money to feed your family that night. And so when we make free food, people just line up because they spend 4 hours waiting for free food. They don't have to work 12. And they bring containers, like water bottles with the tops cut off them, and all the kids have them, and they're filling up, and they're eating and trying to fill up a second time. And they got everybody standing in line to get. And you realize most of what we're dealing with in this country is first world problems. Which isn't bad. I mean, if you're in a first world country, then you should deal with first world problems. But you shouldn't become blind to the reality that for the vast majority of the planet, they would love to have first world problems. They would love to worry about systemic racism, so they didn't have to worry about systemic hunger. Did you guys let that one sink in? a lot of people in the world would really like it if they could suffer our problems, because their problems make our problems look really small. That's why it's important to, it's like you don't learn your own language till you go somewhere else. Mark Twain also said, if you want to get rid of racism and bigotry, just travel. It cures you of all those things. They actually had a disease called Sahib disease. Now I'm digging deep. Like, there's a Sirius XM has a radio station called Deep Tracks, where they play you got to really be a fan of the band to know the tracks they're playing. And so this is the Deep Tracks. There was a disease called Sahib disease in India during the British Raj. British people, white British people, would go to India and they would get so sick of Indian mannerisms and culture that they would start beating up Indian people on the daily. Like, Indian people, they wog their head. You guys know what that is? And it can mean a lot of things. It can mean I don't know. It can mean yes. It can mean no. It really just depends. It can mean anything, That head wog is a very nuanced. It's a very nuanced gesture that carries a wallop. You really got to sort through it. But British people would just freak out. Indian people would wog their head and they'd grab them by the head. They'd be like, this means no, this means yes. Fun fact, I did that once. I lived in India for a number of years, and at one point I got Sahib disease, like a minor case of Sahib disease. Somebody was messing with me, wogging their head at me, and wouldn't give me a straight answer. And so I grabbed them by their head and I said, this means no, this means yes. People are looking at me like, are you serious? Are you joking? I'm serious. I was a lot younger. I made mistakes. I'm sorry. I put my hands on this poor soul. We worked it out. I apologize. I think. Maybe. I can't remember. It was long. It was like almost 30 years ago. But yeah, there's this thing called Sahib disease. You can Google it. Where people would get freaked out and they would just start to hate Indian culture because it was so foreign and spun them out so much. And they would just, it was almost like PTSD. They just have to send them back to England. You saw a little bit of this in the Gulf Wars. You started to see American and Western soldiers start to become really vicious. It happened in Vietnam too. It was before my time. It happened in Vietnam. It happened in World War II. There's stories of American troops or just, Allied troops, the good guys, committing horrible war atrocities. There was actually a movie, Clint Eastwood did a movie about Okinawa, about the Battle of Okinawa. What was it called?
Flags of Our Fathers.
Flags of Our Fathers was the first one, and the second one?
Letters from Iwo Jima.
Letters from Iwo Jima, yeah. I lived in Japan too, southern Japan. And so Okinawa, Iwo Jima are off the coast of southern Japan. And so, actually there's a precursor to the movie. I'm really off topic now, but I'm just going to go with it. And I'm smart enough where I'll be able to tie it all back together, don't worry. It'll seem like I almost planned it like this. There's a movie called The Thin Red Line. That's going back a ways. Thin Red Line was a very interesting film. Maybe it was released in 2000, 2001. I think Ron Howard might have done it. He was the guy from Happy Days who actually became he was whatever, the redheaded stepchild from Happy Days, whatever his name was. And he became quite a good director in his own right. The Thin Red Line was interesting because it was about the Battle in the Pacific. And there were all these little islands that we went to in the Pacific where we fought these really drawn out, ugly battles with the Japanese. And so the Thin Red Line was interesting because it portrayed the Japanese as heroic and noble. And it portrayed the Americans as vicious. Well, we don't normally do that. We're always the good guys, and the bad guys are whoever we got issues with. But the Thin Red Line was interesting because it flipped the script. It had an American soldier making a necklace out of the ears of killed soldiers, which actually happened. Happened in World War II, happened in Vietnam. You heard that right. They made a necklace out of the ears of soldiers they killed and wore it around. Like they took talismans, like war trophies, parts of the dead carcasses of the people they defeated. Heavy stuff. It wasn't like that didn't happen on the other side either. And so macabre stuff happens in the fog of war and people start to lose it. That's a whole other conversation. But the Thin Red Line was very interesting because it portrayed the enemy and the decency that obviously many soldiers, like Donald Trump said, I assume some are good people. And so, they took it upon themselves to make a war film where it wasn't just that the other guys were the bad guys, but the viciousness of our own troops was brought out, and the goodness. So anyway, I'm fairly certain that Clint Eastwood saw that movie, got inspired by it, and he did Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, which was a very favorable story from both sides. But the Letters from Iwo Jima was about the nobility and the beauty and the sacrifice of the Japanese. And the goodness of them in the face of, cruelty that they were receiving from the Americans at that time. And so it's important to learn to see things from the other point of view. And so Mark Twain's quote that if you travel, you get rid of racism and bigotry. It's not without exception. There are some circumstances where by traveling you become more ensconced in and more entrenched in your bigotry. It can happen if you have a bad mind or if you're in a bad situation. I would attribute mine to having a bad mind and the soldiers to being in a really bad situation. But for the most part, traveling eventually, water wears away the stone, and you see the humanity of the people that you're interfacing with, and you realize they're just like you are. And sometimes you even have that thought, there but by the grace of God go I. And you have a broader perspective. And you become a more complete human, capable of a deeper level of empathy and love. Do you guys follow that? It's important to think about the rest of the world. It's important to consider such things. And one little mini way you can do that is by expressing your opinions and getting them out to an audience. Because if you do that, you're starting to bring yourself into a dialogue with other people, and it reveals your biases and your blind spots, and you become better for it. You become more logical, more reasonable, more well thought, more refined in your thought, more empathetic. You become a better public speaker and a better debater. There's a whole just host of things which happen when you get yourself out of your comfort zone and speak what's stewing around in that melon of yours. So I like to do that and force myself into a conversation because it tidies me up. And so I don't prepare for classes, generally speaking. I give enough of them that I just share with you guys my thought process to take you guys on a journey with me, and it's good for me. It puts things in real time. I had an art gallery at one point. I was selling paintings. I sold paintings to somebody who had been in a precursor to the UFC, like in Denver in the 80s. He won. He had the trophy there to prove it. And so we were talking, and I was hanging a painting for him in his house. This was out in Corona. And he said to me, I never I saw this one guy jump on this other guy's neck and put him in a guillotine and just wrap his legs around him. It's called the guard. and just choke him, you know? And I thought there's no way out of that. I go, oh, there's a way out of that. And he goes, really? How? And I go, oh, put me in one. Put me in the choke. Let's do it right now. And he put me in the choke, and I got out of it. I was like, oh, that's how you get out of it. Because, there's certain, one time I said to my coach, who was teaching me wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I said, what would you do if the guy bit you? Like, you're on top of him, you're glued to him, but what if he started biting you, like under your arm? What are you going to do? You can't get away. It's called kinamatai. It's a Filipino art of biting and eye gouging. It mixes really nicely with wrestling in the self-defense situation. There's a guy named Paul Vunak who got really good at it. Anyway, so my coach was like, I don't know, try biting me. I was like, Coach, I don't want to bite you. He was like, no, it's okay. Bite me as hard as you can. And so he got on top of me in top position, and I bit him as hard as I could, and he just kind of swam his arm out, exposed my neck, and then bit me in the neck. And I was like, that's what I do. That's like, you forget sometimes. Like, I had one time, we're just, like I said, we're deep in the annals of history here, in my embarrassing history. One time, some guy attacked me, and so I had to put him down, and I got on top of him, and I said, are we done? I was kneeling on top of him, mounted on him, and he back-fisted me in the face. From the ground, bam, banged me right in the mouth. And I started bleeding. And that didn't go well for him, because I don't think he did the math that whatever force he could generate from bottom position with me on top of him, I could generate a whole heck of a lot more force from top position towards him. Did that make sense? And whereas when he hit me in the face and my head went back, I had a bunch of air behind me. But when I hit him in the head, he had the concrete behind him. And it was like it wasn't a good day for him. People don't realize, I'm biting my coach, and he's on top of me. If he could swim out of that, he could bite me, and now I'm really in trouble. Do you guys follow this? So, again, this importance of thinking things through and thinking about things from the other person's party, so you don't get this really foolish, myopic, short-sighted, narcissistic delusions of grandeur version of reality where you're not really in communication, in a fight, in a conversation, culturally, in terms of crying about your problems. I'm just thinking about Leela, who likes to cry every day about something or other. I mean, there's others, but I'm picking on you right now. And so, it's become like a meme, that Leela cries on the daily. We're just doing it today. She's self-deprecating. She has fun with it. We definitely join in. And so, she's just talking about, but in all seriousness, if I talk to somebody, a lot of times, if I hit them with the big picture, they'll be like, well, what, am I just not supposed to cry? If I'm on my cycle, or I got dumped, am I just not supposed to cry because there's 3 million kids a year dying of starvation? Am I just never allowed to have feelings? He's going to hit me with the truth stick. I'm dying, babies. I can't cry because I'm loaded. She squealed because she said that to me earlier today. It's just fun fact. And it wasn't Leela for you people listening online. But her name sounds like Leela. And it sounds like Lola. No, you can cry. You can be depressed. And you should think about the 3 million people who are dying too. And if that sobers you up and makes you stop crying, then you probably shouldn't be crying. And if you cry with a little less taking yourself all too seriously, that's okay too. You should be able to see the big picture and also have your own feelings. But you shouldn't require to live in an ivory tower so that you can maintain full dramatization when it comes to having your feelings. You should force yourself to live in a brave new world, in a real world where you're aware of what's going on and have your feelings and your struggles. And so it should be both. Not like, the goal isn't, can I just be totally cloistered and completely sheltered and completely ignorant of the bigger picture? No, you can't. Not if you're hanging out with the right people. You can process whatever you're going through, and if you got good people around you, they'll help you with it. And part of that's seeing the big picture. You got to walk and chew gum. I know it sounds hard, but lots of people have done it before you, and you can do it too. I got faith in you. You don't have to crawl for the rest of your life. So, seeing the big picture and letting that modify and affect your problems. Having conversations with other people. And forcing yourself to let go of your cognitive biases and see a bigger picture and move towards a shared narrative. Testing your connections and correlations. Traveling to interact with people. Learning another language. All these things are incredibly valuable. They make you a better person. And then when you find real truth, and you find that truth is true wherever you go and whatever you do, you really start to even value that. If you are in possession of some universal, amazing truth, that will also be revealed through those dialogues. And you'll be able to appreciate that. Do you guys follow this? Okay. That was all a full tangent. But it's not hard to connect the dots and connect a couple of unrelated things and make it seem like it was always intended. That's not tough to do. And so, what I wanted to talk about today was, my wife asked me the other day during a class I gave, she said, we say all these special things about our gurus, that they're avatars, that they're this, that they're that. And so couldn't another religion say the same thing about their leaders? Did you follow that? And I said, yeah, they can say that. What's wrong with that? There was an assumption that somehow or other, it was an assumption of exclusivism, that we're the way, the truth, and the light, and we're the best. And if other people can make the same claim we make, then there's something wrong with us. We should be able to be head and shoulders above everybody else. Did you follow? It was an unstated premise of her doubt, was that there was something wrong. And so when I said to her yes, it was kind of like everyone in the room had that same unstated premise. That it doesn't look really good on inspection. It's exclusivistic. It's bigoted. It's condescending. It's even contemptuous. It has this it smacks of cultural superiority and all sorts of other stuff we're supposed to be eschewing in this day and age. But anyway, I just responded back and I go, yeah, they can do that. No problem. But that doesn't mean that every single religion is equally as valid. That's another unstated premise. That the only way, to show that our tradition is better than another tradition is to claim that our teachers are more special. But that's not how you do it. That's not how you do it. You talk about the teachings. You follow? Like if we want to compare wrestling styles, like European chain wrestling versus American freestyle wrestling, you don't talk about the outfits that they wear or the different haircuts they have. Because what you're comparing is wrestling teams and their ability to wrestle. You follow? You don't want to if you're trying to figure out who's a better yoga teacher, you don't look at their butts and who has the better looking butt to figure out who's a better yoga teacher. Because there's other ways to develop your glute muscles. And there's genetic factors involved and all sorts of stuff. Plus, there's surgeries now. You can do a Brazilian butt lift and all sorts of stuff. Things I know, right? So, if you want to compare two yoga teachers, look at their yoga practice. Duh. You want to compare two wrestling teams, look at their wrestling. And so if you want to take figure out, which amongst the various traditions of the world you want to participate in, look at their teachings. And those lend themselves very good to a comparative analysis. When you find significant discrepancies in a set of teachings, probably the people who believe those teachings have problems too. Like if you look at racism as a philosophy of life, and you reveal that racism is wrong, then racists have bad beliefs, and they become discounted in terms of how seriously you take them because of those incorrect beliefs. Did you follow that? So if you want to look at the people in a tradition, you can look at their teachings as a starting point, and if there's major incongruencies in their teachings, then the people who hold those teachings have automatically, by transitive logic, they have major incongruencies. Did you follow that? It seems obvious, but I'm pretty sure I need to say it a third time. If I want to judge people, instead of just judging them by externals, if the thing that I'm comparing is a set of teachings, to figure out who has the best teachings, look at those teachings. And if it's revealed through looking at those teachings that a wide number of people, a lot of people in a given group, have some really bad ideas about the nature of the world, that's a problem for them. I'm not willing to separate somebody from their belief system. That guy's a racist, that guy's a bigot, that guy believes in pedophilia, but he's really nice. You follow? You are what you believe. You are what you eat too, but you are what you believe as well. When Trump was in Charlottesville, and he was like, there's good people on both sides of the... But the guys on the bad side were like KKK members. There's good Americans on both sides. No, there's not. You can't do that. That's like the Nazis were good people. I mean, the Nazis actually were good people too. If you look at it's not like all of Germany became evil. That was a whole experiment in thought control. It took 50 years. It goes back to Wagner, the racist. Works its way all the way through World War I and World War II. It's a monster myth. The stab in the back myth. And in post-World War I mean, what it took. I mean, do you know that it took Hitler 10, 15 years to get the German people to turn a blind eye to the final solution? He did stuff like sponsored neoclassical art exhibits where he had art of neoclassical art, really humanistic art, people in great shape. He sponsored that, and he would compare it to the works of Pablo Picasso and other Cubism artists who were into the abstract thing, which was all the rage in the decades prior to World War II. And he would say, just see the distorted faces? That's Mongoloid art. That's the Jews. They're interbreeding with us. I'm part Jewish, by the way. I'm also part German, so there you go. I'm kind of on both sides of that aisle. But they say these Mongoloids with their distorted features, that's because the Jews are interbreeding with the Germans. And pretty soon the whole nation will look like this. And these are Jewish artists, and these are Aryan artists, German artists. And we have to sponsor these. They sponsored these and gave awards for this type of art. And they criticized this type of art and tried to build it into a whole theory. And they spent years and money getting people to really believe it. And eventually it's not like people were kill the Jews. They just turned a blind eye. It wasn't like they were in the death camps. They just turned a blind eye. It was a gradual process of objectifying the others and hating the others. We got to be careful we don't do that with the QAnon people. Those people who were in the insurrections, they're also Americans. They might have some stupid ideas, but somehow we got there. We got to deal with that. Just reveal what was already there. Same thing happened in the O.J. trial. When O.J. Simpson was acquitted, they had these photographs. It's back in the days when they actually took photographs instead of just YouTube, camcorder videos or cell phone videos. And it showed high schools all over America, and all the white people looked totally morose. And all the black people super happy. OJ did it, by the way. But of course I believe that I'm white. No, I believe that because I watched the trial and read books on it. I lived near OJ growing up. I saw OJ hundreds of times in my childhood at the neighborhood park. OJ was a regular figure. I'd see him at the pizza joint when I was in the pizza joint. I'd see him around town walking around. OJ! OJ was like I knew OJ. It's not like we're buddies. He's like, hey Todd. That was my birth name. It wasn't like that, but it was I knew OJ. I saw him. Said what's up to him a bunch of times. Grew up, I don't know, 3-minute drive from his house. But the social commentary was just we thought, the civil rights movement had ended bigotry, but look at the divide. You just divided by color what the people's beliefs were. We're kind of experiencing a similar thing now. We're kind of experiencing the same thing. It's a social phenomenon where, when you have two parties, like a red and blue party, then the extreme fringes of the party end up winning the day because they help you to separate the two and make it very clear the distinction. So the centrist politicians in the red and the blue, they end up becoming more extreme over time because they have to do so to keep up with the Joneses to differentiate themselves from the other parties. The parties actually grow further apart from one another, and it takes a lot of work to have things come closer together. The natural tendency of human beings, because we want to belong to a group, and part of the way we do that is by defining ourselves as being different from the others, is we then move in the fringe elements pull us further apart over time. Yet another reason for you to go native and get into it with other people and embed yourself with other people and walk a mile in their shoes and really learn the lost art of empathy. So if you want to compare something, compare the actual thing. Don't compare the bells and whistles. And so my wife was worried because she thought, well, they could make the same claim about their saints. Not exactly, because our claims about our saints are intimately and inexorably linked to our theology, and therefore we can talk about our theology, compare it to another tradition's theology, and without that theology, we're not making any claims about our saints. The claims are growing out of naturally our theology. Therefore, if another group, I'll give you an example of bad theology. God is all good and all powerful, and an eternal hell exists. That's an example of a bad theology. Well, how many idiots believe that? Like 5 billion people in the world. Like 2/3 of the world's population believes that. 99.x% of Christians and Muslims believe that. And the numbers are 3+ billion for Christians and 1.5 to 2 billion Muslims. I'm saying you're looking at 2/3 of the world's population right there. And 99.x% of them believe this. If God's all good, right? Will he ever shut the door on you forever? The answer is no. We're going to play fast because I can't pause for dramatic effect quite as much. God's all good. Would he shut the door on you forever? No. If you have free will, should he shut the door on you forever? No. If he did shut the door on you forever and you change your mind, would that make him not all good? Hell yeah, it would. Would it make him evil? It absolutely would. If God's all powerful, would he have to shut the door on you forever? No, there's no reason why. I can't think of any logical reason why God would have to shut the door on you forever. Would an all good, all powerful God let you out of hell if you felt bad? Sure. They would probably never create a hell in the first place. But yes, if he did create a hell, if we stipulate to that one, just for the purpose of the argument, he'd have to leave the door open. Do you guys follow that? So an all good, all powerful God is incongruent with the decisions you make in this one lifetime and the thought crimes you might commit in this one lifetime by believing the wrong thing, damn you to drown in a lake of fire for all eternity. That's a dystheistic conception of divinity. It's an evil God. You follow? The kinds of saints that grow out of that tradition got issues. In fact, the more saintly you become in that tradition, that means the more divinized you become, right? Well, if God is functionally evil and judgmental and condemning people and torturing them for making mistakes in their thought process, what are you going to do when you become fully divinized? You're going to start doing the same thing to people. As a starting point, you look at the thing you want to compare. Don't look at the uniforms of the wrestlers. Look at the wrestlers. Don't look at the derrieres of the wrestling team, or the, definitely not the wrestlers, of the yogis. Look at their yoga practice. You can look at the derrieres of wrestlers. You know, something you could do. Confirmed. Was that a gunshot?
Fire.
Okay. He's in the military. Defer to him. Compare the teachings. And then you can look at the people who believe those teachings and you can better understand them and their good qualities and their bad qualities. Really, when you look at a religion, what are you looking at? You're looking at a conception of self. And you're looking at the conception of God. What are the two main theories of self? One theory is you're fundamentally broken. Who believes that? Those same 5 billion people. You're broken. You're fundamentally broken. Why are you broken? Because your great-great-great-grandparents did something wrong. That's, of course, illegal. To make someone guilty of a crime committed by their forefathers, it's actually illegal. We evolved out of that. It used to be you could be sent to jail for what your grandfather did, or you could have a debt that your grandfather incurred and you have to pay it. You could be sold into slavery and all sorts of stuff like that. But we figured out kind of when we rolled out of the Middle Ages into the Renaissance period that was just ridiculous. And so practically every country of the world, except for maybe in rural Afghanistan or something like that, where they're still following Pashtunwali or something like that, we've evolved out of this. But somehow or other, if you look at Christian theology and Jewish theology, it's based on this slave model, this selling into indentured servitude model, this passing on your debts to your progeny model. It's illegal. It's in serious need of revision. So one theory is self, you're fundamentally broken. because of something somebody else did. I listened to punk music growing up. There was a band called Minor Threat, good band in the 80s. They had a song called Guilty of Being White. Ian MacKaye, who's the lead singer of the band, he grew up in D.C. He went to a bust-in school, and so, 80% of his school was black, and he was like part of the minority. The schools I grew up going to were the same. It was like, I don't know, 40%, 50% Mexican, and then like 20, 30% black, and like 20% white or something like that. So I grew up in the same schooling situation. He had a song called Guilty of Being White. I'm sorry for something I didn't do. I haven't heard the song since I was 13, but I remember the lyrics. I'm sorry for something I didn't do. Lynch somebody, but I don't know who. You already condemned me 100 years before I was born. I'm guilty of being white. I'm a convict. I'm a racist slime. I've only served 19 years of my time. That's like the lyrics of the song. He was making this point that we do this. We judge people because of what their parents or their grandparents might have done. He was pointing out the fundamental hypocrisy of it, because no one wants to be judged what their forefathers did. Wrong. We want to be able to write our own ticket. So one conception of self is you're condemned because of what some other people did. The other conception of self, of course, is that you're pure. And you might be covered or ignorant, but that the soul is fundamentally good, and all people are fundamentally good. You could imagine, children playing with dolls. And one child's playing with two dolls, and the two dolls say to each other, you're broken, you're evil, you're going to drown in a lake of fire. And the only way out is if you surrender to this person who bled for you. Because God needs blood. And somebody had to bleed. And so he ransomed your soul back. And you should accept how broken you are and vicariously perfect yourself by aligning yourself with this person. What would you think about the parents that raised that kid? Alternatively, you're good. You got some ignorance in you. You got some things you need to work on, but your bones are good. You're fundamentally good. You're innately a good person. It's a pure soul theology versus a corrupted soul theology. Those are the two main things on offer. There are some various flavors and nuances to them, but those are the basic theologies and their conception of self that are on offer in the world today. We're obviously the latter. Then you got your theories about divinity. You got this dystheistic, angry, violent God ready to smite you for thought crimes. Or you've got another conception. And here's what I wanted to lecture on in 5 minutes or less. Because a religion really is just a conception of self, the world, and divinity. And so when you want to start to study the teachings, those are the core elements you want to start to discuss. And then you can build out from there. But that's the initial framework you want to develop. So what's our conception of self? I threw one out at you. What's our conception of the world? We're going to skip that for today. What's our conception of divinity? I gave you one. I gave you the dystheistic, the evil God one. Here's another one. Satyam dishati arhito arhitam nrinnam. Naivartado yatpunar arhito yata sarup vedate bhajatam anichitam ichapidanam nijapada palavam. There you go. Certainly, the Lord will give you what you ask for. Unless giving you that thing will addict you and make you ask again and again. In those circumstances, even though you don't want it, he will give himself to you. And by giving you himself, he'll satisfy all your desires. The Supreme is kind. If you want something in this world, he'll give it to you, no problem. But he cares about you. And so when the thing you want is bad for you, in that case, because he loves you and you've turned to him, and you've asked for help, he starts to therapize you. He starts to get therapeutic with you. He starts to help you. You follow this? This is our conception of divinity. Just let it kind of sink in. Krishna wants to help you. Whatever you want, he's happy to let you have. But when you start asking for things which are bad for you, Krishna can't do that because he loves you. So what does he do in that circumstance where you've turned to him and you're asking for his help, so he has a responsibility for you? But you're asking for poison. What does he do? He gives you himself. Nija pada pallava. He gives you his lotus feet. His lotus bud feet. It's like literally what's said. Which means he gives you service, and he gives you a relationship of love and trust, and he gives you intimacy, and he gives you connection. And so Krishna injects himself into your life in a powerful way in those circumstances where you're addicted to the wrong thing, but you're sincere. And he goes against your desires. You follow? Ichapidanam. He actually satisfies all your desires. Anichitam, even though you don't desire him. He satisfies you because he's Krishna. He's the all-attractive. And when Krishna gives himself to you, he gives you all the happiness and joy you could ever want from the source. And so instead of going to the dealer on the street corner for the cut product, you're getting it from the reservoir of pleasure. You're getting it from the origin of all happiness. The word Krishna means the reservoir of pleasure. That was my childhood. Cut products on street corners. And so, you guys following us? That's our conception of divinity. You got fractured soul, pure soul. Angry God, just can't wait to throw you in hell forever for thought crimes. And a loving deity who holds you in the palm of his hand. And if you turn towards him and you're sincere, won't let you fall. You follow this? Okay. And if you want to compare if you want to compare a tradition, look at the teachings, and that tells you all sorts of stuff about the people that adhere to those teachings. And that circumvents the just arbitrary, my guys are better than your guys, or this or that, the other thing. You follow? It's a way to circumvent that and get into something where we can even the playing field and actually discuss the core of our tradition, like the wrestling of a wrestling team, like the yoga of yoga teachers. And that exercise brings you into conversation with other people, which is healthy, which removes us versus them mentality, which gets rid of cognitive biases, which gets rid of blind spots, which forces you to become a better thinker. And AOC is so cool because she picked up on this, and it's just the way to roll. And so she raised money for Texas. When Chris Christie asked Texas for help, Ted Cruz said no dice. But now Texas is suffering. You follow? And people are jumping up. They're treating others how they wish to be treated. Do you see how I made that little connection there? See how cool that was? You ready for this one? Here we go. Krishna brings himself into dialogue with us and empathizes with us and puts himself in our shoes. And so the entire thing I talked about of what we need to do to enrich ourselves and have a more full experience of existence, the Supreme Lord himself, the omniscient one, the one without a second, who doesn't need to do that for anybody, still to have a relationship with us and help us, puts himself in our shoes and interfaces with us in a therapeutic way and lets us do what we want in this world and facilitates that, but at the same time always keeps his eyes on what's in our best interest and is willing to sort of compromise his objectivity and his separateness in order to inject himself into our life, which is actually quite a vulnerable thing to do. To go the extra mile for somebody who's not even asking for you and give yourselves to them. It's very vulnerable. It creates intimacy. But we weren't even asking for that intimacy. But we had that fine quality, so Krishna sees the best in us. Even when we're not there yet, injects himself, puts himself in harm's way, gets into dialogue with us, empathizes with us, walks a mile in our shoes, embeds himself with us, goes native with us, and uplifts us. And so the thing I've been recommending that we do to enrich ourselves is actually exemplified and modeled by Krishna himself in the very verse. Did you guys follow that? And I figured that out early on in my class when I was tangenting. I decided I can tangent as much as I want because I got this ace up my sleeve. And when it comes time for the reveal, I got a royal flush, you know? And so we need to get ourselves out there. Maybe we won't always end up with a royal flush. But it makes us vulnerable too. It makes us real. It means people can trust us because they get to see inside our head what we're thinking and what we're going through. We should trust in our own goodness. That we put ourselves out there and be honest. And let that, purify us and refine us and make us better people. And that's good for us when we're coming up. But that principle of coming into conversation with others and meeting people where they are, that's true for eternity. Because you find, at least in our conception of divinity, it's the fundamental nature of the Supreme. This really gets into, and I won't explore this, this really gets into the difference between a dualistic philosophy, which has a fundamental badness or evil and a fundamental goodness, which are almost like competing deities, versus a monistic philosophy, where everything comes from one source in monism. And therefore you have to find a way for everything to have good in it. You have to find a way to find good in everybody. That kind of holism, that kind of ability to interface, that kind of ability to bring out the good in people, to see the good in people, to see like how everybody can come up, and there's good in everybody. That comes from monism, comes from a holistic conception of existence, which is based on that everything comes from the divine, and therefore everything has some merit, and you just have to become an expert surgeon who can extract the good, following the master surgeon, Krishna, who sees and extracts the best in us, if only we'll let him. All right. Thank you guys for playing. Let's get some feedback.